Zhang Hongjian. Zhang Hongjian, a native of Yongping County, was just 18 years old and a renowned scholar in the county. At that time, the county magistrate of Liaozhai was exceptionally greedy and cruel, causing great suffering among the people. A scholar surnamed Fan was beaten to death by Magistrate Zhao with a cane, leading to widespread indignation among the scholars in the county who sought justice for Fan by appealing to the provincial governor's office. They asked Zhang Hongjian to draft a petition and accompany them to the provincial capital. Zhang Hongjian agreed to their request. However, Zhang's wife Fang, who was beautiful and wise, upon hearing the scholars' plan, advised Zhang against joining them. She reasoned, "Working with scholars may lead to victory together, but it could also mean failure together. If victorious, everyone will claim credit for themselves, but if defeated, they will scatter and cannot regroup. In today's world where people value wealth and power, it's hard to determine right from wrong based on truth alone. Moreover, you are alone without brothers. If anything goes wrong, who will come to your rescue?" Zhang Hongjian was deeply impressed by her words and regretted his decision. He politely declined the scholars' invitation, only writing the petition for them before leaving. The provincial governor's office briefly investigated the case, but did not reach a conclusion. Magistrate Zhao bribed his superiors with a large sum of money. The scholars were then unjustly accused of collusion and arrested, and those who wrote the petition were also pursued. Fearing for his safety, Zhang Hongjian had no choice but to flee his hometown. Zhang Hongjian fled to the area of Fengxiang Prefecture in Shaanxi Province, where he ran out of money. As dusk fell and darkness enveloped the western hills, he found himself wandering in the wilderness, unable to find shelter. Suddenly, he spotted a small village nearby and hurried towards it. An elderly woman was about to close the door when she saw Zhang Hongjian and asked him what he wanted. Zhang Hongjian explained his situation truthfully. The old woman said, "Eating and sleeping are trivial matters, however, there are no men in the house, so it's inconvenient to accommodate guests." Zhang Hongjian replied, "I don't dare to have high hopes. As long as you can allow me to stay inside the door for the night to avoid the dangers of the wilderness, I'll be satisfied." The old woman then let him in, closed the door, and gave him a bundle of dry grass, advising him, "I sympathize with your plight and have agreed to let you stay without permission. You must leave before dawn, lest my young lady finds out and blames me." Zhang Hongjian leaned against the wall and began to doze off. Suddenly, he noticed a lantern flickering with light. It turned out that the old woman was escorting a young lady out. Zhang Hongjian quickly hid in the shadows and secretly watched. The young lady was in her 20s and very beautiful. When she reached the doorstep and saw the bundle of dry grass, she asked the old woman about it. The old woman truthfully explained. The young lady became angry and said, "How can we, a family of women, accommodate unrelated men?" She then asked, "Where is he?" Zhang Hongjian, fearful, emerged from the shadows and knelt down on the steps. After learning about his background and family name, the young lady's expression softened slightly. She said, "Fortunately, he is a refined scholar. There's no harm in letting him stay. But you neglected to inform me, which is a neglectful and crude oversight. How can we entertain a gentleman like this?" She then instructed the old woman to lead the guest into the house. "I will not conceal the truth. I already have a wife at home." Shenhua smiled and replied, "Your honesty is evident, but it doesn't matter. Since you don't reject me, I'll go and arrange for a matchmaker tomorrow." With that, she made to leave. Zhang Hongjian reached out and held her back, and she stayed. Early the next morning, before dawn, Shenhua got up and gave Zhang Hongjian some silver, saying, "You can use this for your travels. It's best to come and go a bit later to avoid being seen by others." Following her advice, Zhang Hongjian made a habit of coming and going late, and after 6 months, it became routine. Early the next morning, before dawn, Shenhua got up and handed Zhang Hongjian some silver, saying, "You can use this as your travel expenses. It's better to come and go a bit later to avoid being seen by others." Zhang Hongjian followed her advice, coming and going at odd hours until it became a routine over the next 6 months. As the couple were reflecting on their situation, they suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. Fang asked who it was, but there was no answer. It turns out that there was a young rogue named X, who had long been enamored by Fang's beauty. That night, as he returned from another village, he saw someone jumping into Fang's courtyard from a distance. Assuming it was someone responding to Fang's secret invitation for an affair, he followed suit. X didn't recognize Zhang Hongjian initially. He just lurked outside the door, eavesdropping on their conversation. When Fang heard footsteps and repeatedly asked who it was, X unexpectedly said, "Who's in there?" Fang, pretending, replied, "No one." X said, "I've been eavesdropping for a long time. It seems there's going to be a caught-in-the-act situation." Reluctantly, Fang had to tell the truth. X remarked. Zhang Hongjian's major case hasn't been settled yet. If it's him coming home, he should be bound and sent to the government office. Despite Fang's earnest pleas, X's words became increasingly vulgar, even coercing her to agree to a liaison with him. With rage burning in his chest, Zhang Hongjian stormed out with a knife and struck X in the head with a fatal blow. X fell to the ground, still yelling, as Zhang Hongjian continued to strike him repeatedly until he died. Fang said, "Things have escalated to this point, and the crime has become even more severe. You must escape quickly and let me bear this accusation." Zhang Hongjian replied, "A true man should face death head-on. How could I disgrace my wife and harm my child just to save my own life? Don't worry about me. As long as our child can receive an education and succeed, even if I die, I'll close my eyes in peace." After daybreak, Zhang Hongjian surrendered himself at the county yamen. Since he was involved in a case under imperial review, the county magistrate only lightly punished him. Shortly after, Zhang Hongjian was escorted from the prefecture to the capital, suffering greatly from the discomfort of his shackles. Along the way, he encountered a woman riding a horse, accompanied by an old woman leading the horse. To his surprise, it was Shenhua. Zhang Hongjian called out to the old woman, wanting to say something, tears streaming down his face. Shenhua turned her horse around, lifted her veil, and exclaimed, "Isn't this cousin 12? What brings you here?" Zhang Hongjian briefly explained the situation, and Shenhua said, "If it were according to cousin's past actions, I should just turn away and ignore you. But I cannot bring myself to do that. My humble abode is not far from here. Let's invite the constables to visit, and I can also provide some financial assistance for you." They walked for a couple of miles and arrived at a mountain village where the buildings were tall and orderly. Shenhua dismounted and entered the village, instructing the old woman to open the door and welcome the guests. Soon, a sumptuous feast was laid out, as if prepared in advance. Shenhua instructed the old woman to convey a message to Zhang. "There happens to be no male host at home. Please persuade the constables to have a few more drinks. We rely on them a lot on the road. People have been sent to gather tens of taels of silver, partly for your expenses, and also to reward the two constables. They haven't returned yet." The two constables were delighted and drank heartily, no longer eager to continue their journey. As night fell, the two constables were completely intoxicated. Shenhua came out, pointed at Zhang Hongjian's shackles, and they immediately fell off. She pulled Zhang Hongjian onto the horse, and they flew away like a dragon. Before long, Shenhua urged him to dismount, saying, "You should stay here. My sister and I have made plans to go to Qinghai, and I've kept you for half a while already, making her wait." Zhang Hongjian asked, "When will we meet again?" Shenhua did not answer. When he asked again, she pushed him off the horse and left swiftly. After daybreak, Zhang Hongjian asked the locals where he was and learned that he was in Taiyuan County, Shaanxi Province. He then went to the county town, rented a house, and started teaching. He changed his name to Gong Ziqian. He lived there for 10 years. Through inquiries, he found out that the authorities had gradually relaxed their pursuit of him in recent years. With this knowledge, he slowly began heading eastward towards his home. As he approached the village, he didn't dare to enter hastily, but waited until nightfall when it was quiet before going in. Upon reaching his home, Zhang Hongjian found the courtyard walls tall and sturdy, preventing him from jumping in. He had to use his riding crop to knock on the door. After a long wait, his wife came out and asked who it was. Zhang Hongjian quietly informed her. Mrs. Fang was overjoyed to hear him and hurriedly opened the door to let him in, pretending to scold him, saying, "If you didn't have enough money in the capital, you should have come back earlier to get some. Why did you come back in the middle of the night?" Once inside, the couple exchanged stories about their lives over the years. They learned that the two constables had also been fugitives and hadn't returned. While they were talking, a young woman came and went outside the curtains several times. Zhang Hongjian asked who she was, and Mrs. Fang said, "She's our daughter-in-law." Zhang Hongjian then asked, "Where's our son?" Mrs. Fang replied, "He hasn't returned from the county town where he participated in the provincial examination." Upon hearing this, Zhang Hongjian shed tears and said, "I've been wandering outside for these years, and our son has grown up. I never expected him to excel in his studies. You've truly exhausted all your efforts." Before he could finish speaking, his daughter-in-law had already prepared hot wine and a meal, filling the table. Zhang Hongjian was overjoyed. He stayed for a few days, always hiding in the room, fearing to be discovered by others. One night, as the couple had just gone to bed, they suddenly heard loud voices and banging on the door from outside. They were terrified and quickly got up together. They heard someone outside asking, "Does this house have a back door?" Mrs. Fong became even more frightened and hastily used a door as a makeshift ladder to help ZHANG HONGJIAN climb over the wall under the cover of night. Then she went to the front door to inquire about the commotion, only to find out that it was the constables coming to deliver the joyful news of their son's success in the imperial examination. Mrs. Fong was overjoyed but deeply regretted letting ZHANG HONGJIAN escape, yet there was no way to chase after him now. One night, ZHANG HONGJIAN ran and crawled through the wild grass and trees, too frantic to discern the path. By the time dawn broke, he was utterly exhausted. Initially, he had intended to head west, but after asking some people along the way, he realized that he was not far from the main road to the capital city. So he entered a village, hoping to exchange his clothes for a meal. He noticed a grand gatehouse with a large red congratulatory banner hanging on the wall, indicating that the household belonged to the Su family, celebrating the success of their son in the imperial examination. Shortly after, an elderly man emerged from the gate, and ZHANG HONGJIAN approached him, greeting him respectfully and explaining his situation. Mr. Su, seeing that ZHANG HONGJIAN appeared respectable and sincere, invited him into the house and treated him to food and wine. Mr. Su then asked where ZHANG HONGJIAN intended to go, and ZHANG HONGJIAN falsely claimed, "I was running a school in the capital city, teaching, and was robbed by bandits on my way home." Mr. Su was willing to let him stay to teach his young son. ZHANG HONGJIAN briefly inquired about Mr. Su's official rank and background, only to find out that he was a retired high-ranking official who had retreated to seclusion, and that his newly appointed successful candidate was his nephew. After more than a month, Mr. Su and another successful candidate came to visit his home. This candidate mentioned that he hailed from Yongping Prefecture, surnamed Zhang, and was a young man of 18 or 19. ZHANG HONGJIAN, due to the coincidence of the candidate's hometown, surname, and lineage with his own, suspected that this young man might be his son. However, considering the prevalence of the same surname in the county, he hesitated to acknowledge him outright. Later that evening, while unpacking their luggage, Mr. Su brought out a register documenting the hometowns and lineages of the successful candidates from their examination, known as the Record of Lineages. ZHANG HONGJIAN eagerly borrowed it to peruse, and upon reading, he discovered that this Zhang candidate was indeed his own son. Overwhelmed with emotion, ZHANG HONGJIAN couldn't help but shed tears as he looked at the register. Everyone was astonished and asked him what was wrong. ZHANG HONGJIAN pointed to the name on the list and said, "This ZHANG HONGJIAN, that's me." He then proceeded to narrate his experiences in detail. Upon hearing this, Zhang's father rushed over and embraced him, weeping with joy. With the comforting words from the Su family, father and son gradually shifted from sorrow to happiness. Mr. Su immediately provided money, silk fabric, and a well-written letter, which he sent to the imperial censor's office. With everything arranged, ZHANG HONGJIAN and his son returned home together. Since receiving the joyful news of her son's success in the imperial examination, Mrs. Fong had been grieving every day for her husband's exile. When she heard that the newly successful scholar had returned, her heart sank even further. Before long, ZHANG HONGJIAN and his son returned home together, startling Mrs. Fong, who thought her husband had come back out of the blue. After learning the full story, the family felt a mix of joy and sorrow. When the father of the troublemaker saw that ZHANG HONGJIAN's son had achieved such a prestigious honor, he no longer harbored any ill intentions. ZHANG HONGJIAN treated X's father even more generously and recounted the true events of the past to him. Moved by ZHANG HONGJIAN's words, X's father felt deeply ashamed. As a result, the two families reconciled and became friends.